Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Neighborhood Scope. So this afternoon we are going to be talking of US-Pakistan ties and perhaps in the broader context of US foreign policy and also Pakistan's foreign policy. My name is Ajay Bisaria. I am a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, and we have a stellar panel that's going to be in this conversation with us. We have Shruti Pandale of the IDSA, the Defense and Strategic Analysis Institute. We have Mr. Matthew Foldy, who is editor-in-chief of the Washington Recorder, joining us and hopefully being able to hear us in Washington, D.C. And we also have our own Sushant Sareen of the Observer Research Foundation. So let me start immediately by talking a bit about the US-Pakistan relationship. The Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar very recently said of the relationship, which has been very much in the news. He said that the two countries have a history of forgetting the troubled history between US and Pakistan. And that has indeed been a troubled history. It started in the 1950s with a relationship centered around the CETO and the CENTO organizations, and also in 1958 when Ayub Khan gave secret basing rights to the United States in Pakistan. It sort of peaked in the 1970s when the US and deception from Pakistan, despite having spent $33 billion over the previous 15 years on Pakistan. And from Pakistan, we often hear the narrative that the US has a very low opinion of Pakistan, and it's a use and throw relationship, that whenever the Pakistan is useful in a transaction, the US is deploying Pakistan. When it's not, it's throwing it away and moving in other directions. So in that context, what should we make of the summer of 2025 when the relationship seems to have climbed new heights, particularly with the lunch hosted by President Donald Trump for Pakistan's newly promoted field marshal in the White House. So we'll try and unpack all these ideas and let's get going. And I'll start with Shruti to talk about perhaps a little bit about how you see this relationship in the larger context of US foreign policy and particularly the Indo-Pacific policy.
Thanks very much, Ambassador. Good afternoon. Thanks to ORF. It's always a pleasure to be part of such panels with such distinguished experts actually on the subject. I think, the question of where India-US ties are at the moment has become interesting because I think for the first time fundamentally in 20 years, the India-US relationship has actually become a domestically polarizing issue. I think that's the sort of fundamental shift we are seeing at the moment. And while, we have seen a lot of the narrative arc talking about the re-hyphenation of India and Pakistan, I think those who will have a somber view on the issue would argue that Washington has had a very tactical approach to relationships in the region. And perhaps it's useful to look at what is Pakistan's utility to Trump when we sort of come down to oversimplified conclusions such as. Having said that, there is no doubt in anyone's mind in Delhi that we've entered a fairly turbulent time in the India-US relationship. Those of us who are still optimistic about it talk about it as being a terrible air pocket that we have to overcome. The India-US relationship has always gone through turbulent times past in the history as well. What has perhaps been the biggest sort of achievement, both from Washington and from New Delhi over the last 20 years when the relationship went to strength from strength, is that it's not that the irritants didn't exist. It's just the fact that we were able to sort of publicly insulate the relationship from the public fallout, what was happening on both sides. I'm not sure, if that's the current situation at the moment. So just if you're looking at a narrative arc on the India-US relationship, let's see, there was a buoyant optimism when President Trump came into power about the trajectory of India-US relationship under him, especially of what it meant for India's aspirations to be a leading power, especially in the theater of opportunity that it calls the Indo-Pacific. But you have seen a series of actions which have called that sort of optimism into question. The trade and tariff breakdown, we're all come to know about that. But what I think troubles India more is perhaps some of the double standards that have come into play, especially with China and other partners in Europe who have been seen as being given more leniency, which is insulting, of course, to India's strategic calculus. You have seen India being singled out and, sort of being told that you are going to face punitive sanctions, secondary sanctions on Russian oil. Outside of the debate as to how India will manage these things domestically, whether quietly through back channel negotiations, the idea is that there is a very strong narrative that is building that this is a fundamental attack on how India thinks and sort of practices the idea of strategic autonomy. You've also seen other actions that have led up to this. You have sort of seen penalizing India on its BRICS participation when there have been other countries who have equally been or more rabid in these conversations. In fact, if you read what has been going on for the last couple of years in terms of the BRICS readout, you'll see India is acting as ensuring that this grouping does not become an anti-Western bloc. So, again, the sort of penalization of India for its BRICS participation and the sudden US hostility towards multilateralism and how India engages with China and Russia, etc. Again, confusing sort of the signaling that's coming out of DC. You've also seen a lot of hits on the Make in India piece. If you, for example, when, the whole push for the India-US relationship was that the Washington sees merit in the argument that a strong India will become a bulwark in Asia against Chinese unilateralism. And how would you achieve that? By ensuring that there is capacity and capability building of Indian efforts. Now you have seen sort of a lot of criticism coming out of the White House on US companies for manufacturing in India. Think of the Apples and the rest and some of the conversation that's been going on. It's invest in America or else. That's the narrative that we're hearing in Delhi. And the other buy-in for India, I think not just from 2020 or Galwan or the strategic logic to the India-US partnership has been the fact that India has made a choice where we've said, well, all our technology collaboration is going to come out of the West. We think of the West, especially the United States, as an enabling partner of our technology journey. And now you see this revival of the debate on techno-nationalism, which is again seeing sort of, will DC curtail tech sharing and co-innovation, which are India's baselines for its development journey going forward. Now, add to all of this is the situation with Pakistan. I think some of the loose statements that have come out of the White House, whether, you can call it Trump's negotiation tactics, but whether it's on the dead economy, whether on the fact that India could import oil from whatever those reserves when they finally materialize in Pakistan, or, just a sense in India or the larger strategic community and perhaps even amongst the parliament debates about the insensitivity from Washington on the issue of terrorism, which is very close to India's espousal of partnerships in the region, has made things very tense. Now, I call this unprecedented because this has become a domestic issue both in India and in DC. And I think if you hear US commentators, they are talking about this being the predecessor to far more volatile issues like the H-1B visa, our tech and mobility partnerships. So the historic sort of bipartisan consensus both in DC and in Delhi while existed, seems to have not had enough backers. You haven't seen when the US sort of China relationship broke down, it was sort of the American business lobby going out and batting for it. We've heard a lot of how India needs to invest in lobbies and so on and so. I'm not sure that's an ethical argument, but I think the fact that, where are the business lobbies going out and batting for India? Do we have the kind of leverage that Beijing had? No, but there was a strategic logic to the India-US relationship, which had China as a binding factor. And that now, even in the context of the Indo-Pacific, has become a difficult conversation to have. Because if you remember the peak of the Indo-Pacific sort of convergence debate, the idea was that you were cultivating quote-unquote habits of cooperation that go beyond the China question. Right now is the time to see some of those habits coming up. But one has also come away with a few home truths in the India-US relationship. One, Trump 2.0, unfortunately for India, does not see ecosystems as being compatible to each other being enough. Here is a presidency where a lot of American analysts have turned around and said, is where you have to show up and kiss the ring. Does India have the sort of luxury to do something like that? I'm not too sure, because you have the idea of American exceptionalism and Indian exceptionalism sort of clashing, if you will, and we can discuss that. India assumed, there are certain hits we have taken on certain assumptions. India assumed that Washington would invest politically. It's been 20 years. We would see more investment in the relationship and continue to insulate it. Trump has told you he has no such plans. And that's something that we'll have to adjust to. Earlier in the India-US relationship, Pakistan and the sensitivities in South Asia were a very key part of our understanding. That's a template that's also gone to flip on its head, and that is going to erode trust, and you will see political stuff damaged. Earlier, third-party ties didn't really bother either side, or you found, even if they bothered you, you found mechanisms to sort of overcome those fears. So whether it was India's relationship with Russia, very tough position that India went through during the peak of the Ukraine crisis, you saw the rumbles in Washington, but they never sort of came and tore the relationship apart. Similarly, but now you're seeing Trump talking about sanctioning and punishing India. The tone and diplomacy has changed, and that's not going to go down very well, because here we are two robust democracies entering electoral cycles, seen as countries which hugely populist leaders with very strong mandates. I'm not sure the space exists either in Delhi or in DC to be seen as the first person blinking, and this will have to have creative management behind the scenes. And I do think this has major consequences for the relationships in the Indo-Pacific, and I see it in two fronts. One is, of course, we right now talk about the fact that the India-US relationship, even though there is political sort of troubles, the larger relationship which comes to defense, tech, and security is untouched. Well, even when there was deep convergence in the India-US relationship, you had constant conversations on the fact that India and US do very well in terms of exercises and training. But when it comes to issues like interoperability or, the ICT sort of networks aligning, India wanted strategic autonomy because of the different sort of templates that it works with in terms of its platforms. And the US was never happy with it. Even before the Trump presidency came in, there were conversations of a harder edge on the Quad and how willing India was going to be to it. But India's answer was, well, we'll manage some with the arms sales and then there will be an understanding. I'm not sure where that understanding stands at the moment. And three, this is also a very testing time of how India is seen in the larger Indo-Pacific. I mean, when at the peak of the India sort of China Galwan crisis, India was seen as the last man standing in Asia to tell China that, look, we will absorb the cost, but we will not bend in the knee. This, unfortunately for us, is one of those situations. The good news is your partners in the Quad, whether it's Australia and Japan, are as flabbergasted as you. India's Prime Minister is going to Japan. You're going to seal a whole, I think it's gone from 5 trillion to 10 trillion sort of investment journey. There are avenues for doubling down on those partnerships. Australia, you see from the beginning of this year, has doubled down on the defense partnerships that we've had. So there are pressure valves that, come in and you can sort of find a balance to it. But I think in the larger defense and tech conversation, where strategic trust is imperative to propel the relationship forward, also to address some of our grievances in the India-US relationship when it comes to technology, capacity and capability development, where we've always accused sort of or felt bad that the Americans have a one-way system where they come and approach our Indian companies and we don't have reciprocal sort of access in that conversation. Where does all of that go? So I think right now is the time perhaps for both sides to sort of recalibrate some of these sensitivities. I'm sure India, you've seen, despite the MEA coming out with certain sort of responses, it's been a very restrained response with the option of the conversation continuing and the hope that the ties go back to sort of the original momentum. But the bottom line remains for India in the Indo-Pacific, the momentum of the India-US relationships remains central. I'll stop here. Happy to.
Thank you, Shruti. And I'm hoping that Matthew Foldy in Washington could get most of what you said. So, Matthew, let me take this question to you. You've heard Shruti say that it was supposed to be the defining relationship of the 21st century, the US-India relationship, but India is puzzled by this behavior. And what is driving the behavior of Washington under Donald Trump? What has caused the turbulence of this month in this relationship? Is it the trade deal? Is it the peace deal with Ukraine? Or is it the Pakistan deal? How does it look from Washington, D.C.?
So happy to be with you guys. I was just a Ricina Fellow this past year, and I've missed all things ORF, so it's a good thing to be with you guys today. And not a shock, given what you guys work on all the time, but this is super important, super timely. I'm here just outside Washington, D.C., and I know less about India than you guys. I know less about Pakistan than you guys. Hopefully, I know a little bit about America to be able to give you guys a sense of what's going on here. I'm a reporter and I'm a Republican, so I cover Trump, the people who run the country right now. So I've got a little bit better of a sense of what's going on here than if you turn on CNN, I think. And, this is an important conversation for a lot of reasons today, specifically. But for me, this is something I've been thinking about for a long time. My dad worked in our embassy in Pakistan in the 1990s, so I've been hearing about the problems with Pakistan for a long time. And I think the main thing for you guys to think about, this is not necessarily a shock. Trump wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And, as far as I'm concerned, I can't think of anyone more deserving than that. Going back to his inauguration address earlier this year, feels like 5 years ago, but he's only been back in the White House for about 7 months. He talked about his efforts to be a peacemaker, and what you guys were just talking about, no spoiler here. I think you guys right now are caught in this crossfire between him and Putin. I think that's the main thing that's going on with India. Obviously, we're mostly talking about Pakistan today. And when I think about Pakistan and Trump, you've obviously got to think about Afghanistan. And, as I've learned about Pakistan for years, as I think of it, it's basically you take the corruption, the lack of education, the radical Islamic extremism of Afghanistan, most of which Pakistan is responsible for with their madrasas, and then throw in nuclear weapons and a bitter animosity towards India, and you've got Pakistan. Now, what you all may not realize, today, August 26th, is a super important day as Trump thinks about foreign policy, because 4 years ago, exactly 4 years ago today, I don't know if this is why you did the panel, it might not be, is the 4-year anniversary of the suicide attack at the Hamid Karzai International Airport. This was an incredibly tragic and avoidable incident. This killed 13 American service members. It killed hundreds of Afghans who were trying to evacuate. And President Trump had the Gold Star families. Gold Star families, if you don't know, are people who lost son, mother, father, brother, sister, daughter in combat. So Trump yesterday had the Gold Star families whose kids, siblings were killed during the Abbey Gate suicide attack in the White House yesterday. He signed a proclamation about how today, August 26th, is being commemorated as that suicide attack. And several of these families, in my day job as a reporter, I write a lot about these people and our failures in Afghanistan. So I was with them yesterday before they met with Trump, and several of these families spoke last summer, almost a year ago exactly, at the Republican convention in Wisconsin. On stage, Trump has met with these families, both not as president when Biden was president, and yesterday as president. Exactly 1 year ago today, Trump was at Arlington National Cemetery with a lot of these families honoring their kids in a very moving ceremony. So why am I telling you all of this other than that it's an important thing? I feel like at this point, at least to me, this has flown under the radar, but Pakistan gave Trump a gigantic foreign policy win in his second term, one of the first. Again, feels like 10 years ago, but it was just around March 2025. Pakistan arrested, helped extradite Mohammad Sharifullah, who was one of the masterminds behind this suicide attack that I was just telling you about. He also is likely to have been heavily involved, if not one of the orchestrators of the Russian concert terrorist attack as well. This is really a horrible person. And then what did Pakistan do well before this trade deal with India, let's say, is up in the air? They nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, which, as I said, he really wants. So that's, I think, how Pakistan has been playing the first couple months of the second Trump term very well. They're extraditing a terrorist who is responsible for the worst suicide terror attack on American service members in recent years. They helped start the trend of nominating Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Now we have countries that we've never heard of that are nominating Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. But as is the case with a lot of things, it helps to be first. And I totally agree. I thought it was a great point that you guys were talking about from your foreign minister, that America and Pakistan forget the history that they have. Because, at the end of the day, I think most Americans, especially from a post-Cold War era, if they're going to tell you one thing about Pakistan, it's that that's where we killed bin Laden. And, he wasn't there without some people in Pakistan at the highest levels knowing that he was taking shelter in that country. And obviously, long before that, this, Pakistan and their madrasas helped destroy and destabilize Afghanistan. Pakistan is, makes Chicago look like it's not corrupt. And, I think problematically, they're supporting the Taliban still and everything else that you all already know. So that's, I think, the way to think about America and Pakistan. They have been, I think, viewed, credibly or not, as helping Trump with some major foreign policy wins. He's doing a lot of domestic policy stuff here that doesn't matter for this conversation. But if you want to look at what really helped kickstart Trump's second term foreign policy momentum, it was Pakistan. And I was thinking about how then that affects you guys. And Trump loves Modi more than I miss Carnatic Cafe. And I will tell you, I miss Carnatic Cafe. So why are things looking a little rough? Okay, well, you guys were already addressing it a little bit. Things look a little bit rough because Trump wants Russia and Ukraine to stop fighting. He wants them to stop killing each other. What's that going to look like? That's a call. That's a conversation for the next one of these calls. I have no idea. I don't think anyone knows how that's going to end. But you guys have seen it. Trump has said it. He said, stop buying Russian oil, buy oil from anyone else. Is it a double standard? Maybe, but I think that to the extent that you guys feel like Trump is holding India to a different standard, I think that you're victims of your own success here. You look at the countries that founded BRICS. Brazil, they're persecuting the former prime minister there, who's an ally of Trump. Russia, we're just talking about. India, okay, we know that. Russia, and then South Africa. You guys remember South Africa's president coming to the White House and Trump humiliating him on a national stage. So when you look at the countries that are the acronym of BRICS, I think that you guys are viewed as by far the strongest and most reliable ally of both Trump and Modi, with that relationship, interpersonal, as well as culturally, values-wise, etc. So when he's looking at trying to get Russia isolated diplomatically, I think he says, okay, well, you kind of are flying in the face of that, so we're going to have this trade deal as leverage here. And one other thing that I'd say, just to open up our conversation, looking forward to more, is if you guys weren't paying attention to the peace deal that Trump helped strike between Azerbaijan and Armenia, I think that's important to this conversation too, as it relates to India and Russia. That was a huge move also to box Putin out of a region where historically Russia has had not only influence, but complete dominance and control. So you guys right now, you're a chess piece with the trade deal vis-a-vis, Putin. But I don't think, and this is just my opinion, I don't think that that will be a forever thing, because America, especially when it comes to India and Pakistan, is very much, in my opinion, on the side of India, not on the side of Pakistan. So that's my opening thoughts here, my early morning, food for thought for you guys on where we're at with Pakistan. Anything that you look at with Trump on a foreign policy standpoint, I think has got to be viewed through, he wants the Nobel Peace Prize and he wants the Russia-Ukraine war to end. At that point, I think most of what we're talking about makes a little bit more sense. So thanks for having me, and looking forward to talking more.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for waking up at 5 a.m. for us. But stay with us. We have a full house here, so we'll come back to you with questions. But I'm going to ask you a quick question. Do you think Trump will wake up today and change his mind on the 25% additional tariff? Today is the last day he has to do it. So what's your guess? That's the big guessing game going on in India.
Well, I think that, I don't know how many of you have seen Pirates of the Caribbean, but I think that we're seeing with a lot of hard deadlines, they're more like guidelines. We see this happening with TikTok, which you guys have wisely banned. Trump says, all right, I'm legally required to do something every night, and I'm just going to not do it. So I think he's probably awake already. He's as crazy sleep schedule I do. Do I think that's going to come today? I don't think so, but I also think that you're going to see that deadline is not as far as you think that it is.
Okay, thank you. Sushant, let's come to you. Talk about anything you heard so far, and particularly where the US-Pakistan relationship is going.
Thanks, Ambassador Bisaria. Actually, these days, a lot of strange things are happening. Even this particular event, normally we would have had diplomats as experts, but today we have a diplomat as the moderator, and we have three journalists and former journalists as analysts. So yeah, I suppose really strange things have started happening. Look, on the Pakistan factor and in the context of India, I don't think the Indians and the Americans have ever seen eye to eye on Pakistan. And I remember even during the days when the relationship between India and the US was supposed to be the next big story, even at that point of time, we had any number of Americans who would come and tell us that, east of India, that is in the Indo-Pacific, we have 95% convergence. and 5% in divergence. West of India, we have only 5% convergence and 95% divergence. So we've never really seen eye to eye. The Indians were always telling the Americans that you are being taken for a ride by the Pakistanis as far as terrorism is concerned. And hearing Matthew, it seems that they've been had once again on this, what Matthew calls a very great gift, which was a foreign policy win. How many of these foreign policy wins were given to the Americans during the 20 years of the war in Afghanistan? Every single big Al-Qaeda guy was actually gifted to Pakistan before a visit was to take place from Pakistan to the United States or from the United States to Pakistan, or the moment the pressure was rammed up on Pakistan, you produced that, what was that guy called? Khalid what? Khalid Sheikh? Khalid Sheikh, Khalid Mohammed Sheikh, Abu Zubaydah, you name the guy, he was produced and handed over to the Americans. And we know how that particular war turned out. The treacherous role that was played by the Pakistanis during the 20 years when they were backing the Taliban completely. And I know it for a fact because in 2003, traveling in Pakistan, there were Pakistanis friends, or erstwhile friends, I should say, who were very active in the tribal belt and who would say that the instructions from the Pakistanis is that don't spare the Al-Qaeda, but don't touch the Taliban. Now, if that's a foreign policy win, then okay, fine, you're welcome to it. But the guy who was handed over to you wasn't really the mastermind of the Abbey Gate attacks. And incidentally, at the time when the Abbey Gate attack happened, people were blaming the Haqqani network. Now nobody's talking about the guy. So I think on this whole terrorism issue, I don't know how much, although it is said that this is one of the central pillars of the new relationship which is developing between the US and Pakistan, I don't know how much of this is based in fact and how much of it based on wishful thinking. The other thing is about how things are going to be, it's basically this India-Pakistan-US triangle. Now, one could be, of course, taking off from what Matthew's saying, look, frankly, I don't consider the Nobel Peace Prize to be anything, so you can give it to Trump or whoever else you want to give it to. Frankly, there are many other undeserving people who have got it. So if President Trump gets it, I am not going to shed any tears on it. I would have thought becoming the president of the United States is the greatest prize in the world, but if he thinks that Nobel Peace Prize is what embellishes his presidency, then he's welcome to it. But there could be certain ego issues involved, especially related to the conflict between India and Pakistan. Now, even out there, I think now the president keeps saying that, well, he's the guy who spoke and who ensured that things don't go out of control. From the Indian side, right from the day one of the conflict, we were very clear that if the Pakistanis are going to stop firing, we will stop firing. And this was the message which was consistently conveyed to all interlocutors from the United States, which did not include the president. In fact, one day before the firing stopped, there was this celebrated interview of the vice president who said, we have nothing to do with what's happening in South Asia. We don't care. It's their fight. They'll sort it out themselves. And the next day, suddenly you take credit for everything that has happened. From the Indian side, again, now the president keeps saying that, I use trade as the dangle. I dangled the trade card before them. The Indian side has been very, very emphatic that in all the conversations they had with the interlocutors from the United States, the trade aspect was never mentioned. That was a separate parallel track which was being negotiated separately. So we don't know, we don't understand, unless of course this was the carrot dangled before Pakistan, that if you back off, we'll give you certain things, and maybe some of those assurances were given to Pakistan in terms of whether it's the trade deal, investments, and what have you. Again, there is this whole and I don't want to get into, because there is no evidence to suggest it, except perhaps some circumstantial one, that there are, the Trump organization and some of his associates are entering into sweetheart deals with Pakistanis. Again, stranger things are known to have happened, but I wonder, would a country like the United States put what it calls a very pivotal relationship with India at stake because somebody is going to make a few $100 million? Maybe, I don't know. Like I said, stranger things are known to have happened. But again, this whole thing about how much, what is this whole crypto thing worth? The Pakistanis say we are going to start mining cryptocurrency and we will use excess energy to mine crypto in Pakistan in collaboration with that company, World Liberty Financial. The thing is that the price at which electricity is sold in Pakistan does not make it a viable proposition. And I don't know where else in the world has it happened that you dedicate energy supply only for crypto mining. Maybe in Pakistan they'll be able to do it, but they've done many other strange things which have never really worked. Again, this whole thing about critical minerals, oil being discovered. I wrote for the ORF also. I've been hearing this for the last 25 years, that suddenly Allah is going to bestow the Pakistanis with some great wealth and they're going to be rolling in wealth. It'll be gold one day, copper the second day, oil the third day, gas the fourth day, back to gold. Nothing has really come out. So maybe something will come out now. Critical minerals, again, I don't know what they have, what they don't have. These kind of studies have happened in Afghanistan in the 70s also. Nothing has come out of there. So there is a bit of, like I said, it really doesn't add up. It really doesn't make sense. There is then the factor of China. Some people say that this is one way to wean away Pakistan from China. And frankly, if anybody thinks that the Pakistanis are going to say, okay, fine, we've taken whatever we wanted from China, there's no new money coming from China anyways. The money right now is actually going from international financial institutions which are dominated by the West. So the people who are throwing good money after bad are not the Chinese anymore. They are not investing any new money in Pakistan. It's the World Bank and the ADB which is investing in projects in Pakistan, and it's not the Chinese. So maybe this is the motivation, and to see whether you can at least get some distance between Pakistan and China, although I find that a little far-fetched whether that is going to happen. But again, when you add China into it, then it does not become a triangle. It becomes more of a quadrilateral or a quad of a different kind. Because as far as India is concerned, I think both India and China sense that the kind of hostility that is on display from the United States, and I'm using the word advisedly, it might seem to be a strong word, but it is a hostile kind of an approach which we are seeing from the American administration. And the American administration is what counts. I don't think what the Congress says, what the think tanks say, whether they agree with what the administration is doing or not doing, really matters. What matters is what the administration wants to do. And we've seen that in the past, and nothing better than 71, to give an example, when the American civil society, the American media, the US Congress, every right-thinking person was critical of the genocide that was taking place in the erstwhile East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. That didn't change the policy of the American administration. They doubled down on it behind Pakistan. So anybody who thinks that, what the various think tanks in DC say, or what various other people say is going to change the policies of this administration, I don't see that happen, really. I would be happy if I was to be proven wrong, because I am one of those who has always believed that India has, the relationship with America is one of the most critical relationships for us. But suddenly, even somebody like me, who was a convert to good relations with America, incidentally, you've got one government in India which is far more pro-West than any other government in India has ever been in the last 80 years. And yet, if this is the kind of attitude that we will see, not that this is not the attitude that the American administration is showing towards other allies, Canada for one, even the Europeans for that matter, the kind of language which is being used, disparaging, demeaning, I don't see how it helps America's cause. I don't see how it advances your cause. Maybe this is a very short-term way of looking at things, and maybe the kind of administration there is looking at only short-term gains and not looking at the long-term damage that is being caused to these relationships. But that's clearly happening. And what you see then is countries like China seeing, okay, fine, that maybe there is an opportunity to settle some of our problems with India. Maybe I'm looking too far. I'm being rather optimistic about the China side. But I think there is a sense that, look, if this hostility is going to only grow going in the future, then should we start looking at some way of balancing it out by settling some of our problems with India? And of course, I think Indians would be stupid to not grab that opportunity if the Chinese are ready to move in that direction. Does that mean all our problems with China will be sorted out? Far from it. Certainly not. I think there will be some serious issues which will remain, many new issues that are going to crop up. But I think some of the problems that have bedeviled relations between us will be settled, and to that extent, that's good. Which brings me to BRICS. You know, again, it's maybe nuance is lost in DC now. But the fact of the matter remains that in that BRICS organization, India was the one pro-Western party in that group which always moderated the stand of the BRICS. And you are, pardon my French, shitting on us for doing that. I don't see how that makes sense. So, for example, when some of the people in BRICS started talking in terms of a BRICS currency, which was the country which actually opposed it, which said that, no, it doesn't work for us? It was India. When in the last BRICS meeting in Brazil, which was the country which said, look, we are okay if you are going to talk about Iran and the fact that, you know, the attack on Iran and condemn it, but it's better if we don't name who were the countries which did that. It was us who were doing that. And despite all of that, if just the sheer fact that we are members of BRICS and we have interests which are not just limited to the United States. We are not a vassal state. We are not a client state. At least, I don't think anybody in India is going to call President Trump daddy. Maybe the Europeans can call him that and like doing it, but I don't think anybody in India is going to do that. So, frankly speaking, it doesn't make sense. And that brings me to the defense relationship between Pakistan and US. I don't see the defense relationship going back to what it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even the 90s. Because I believe that under the current administration, they are not going to give friendship prizes or packages of weapon systems to Pakistan. Unless, of course, something so big is happening that none of us is aware of it, I don't see that happen. If you are going to be charging, and actually we are accused of profiteering from Russian oil, but the Americans are profiteering from supply of weapons to Ukraine now, I don't see how you're going to sell weapons at bargain basement prices to the Pakistanis, which they actually get at friendship prices from China. So I don't see much in store of this defense relationship. And last 2 points, I know I'm taking too much time, but just let me add these last 2 points. One is of this whole, and both of them are linked with the appointment of the new ambassador and the special envoy for South and Central Asia. Now, it is possible that somebody like him has been appointed. It's not as though Delhi is the most prized posting for an American diplomat, even a political appointee. And yet, if somebody as close as that to Trump is being appointed out here, then there is something which is at play. Now, is that something to bring the relationship back on track and take it forward, smooth out the rough edges, or is it to mess it up even further? If Donald Trump, with his, I wish he was to get the Nobel Prize this year, because at least that would get us rid of that problem of his trying to, make peace unnecessarily. But if this whole thing is about getting, some kind of meddling in India's problems with Pakistan, I don't think this is going to help the India-US relationship at all. I think it is going to only mess it up even more than what has already been messed up. But if this appointment is to try and make some kind of strategic adjustments as far as South and Central Asia is concerned, get the Americans to have a greater footprint in this region, which has been going either into the Chinese orbit or has been in the Russian orbit, and try and get a greater footprint out here, then I don't know. But again, I think there are a lot of unanswered questions on that, questions related to connectivity, questions related to a whole lot of other things, which probably have not been seriously thought out. And then there is the Iran factor. Again, just as I don't think you're going to get any relief from Pakistan as far as terrorism is concerned, there are going to be limits to what the Pakistanis are going to do, because after all, jihadist terrorists are their biggest strategic asset. I don't see how the Pakistanis are going to go beyond a point, even against Iran. They have their problems, and I believe, at least in some of those areas adjoining Iran, there is, at least those are the conspiracy theories, or those are the reports, that there is some American presence, there is some British presence, all kinds of other groups are at play out there to create some kind of trouble in Iran, using groups like the Jandullah and others. But beyond that, I don't see the Pakistanis opening a new front at the behest of the Americans against Iran. So I'm as, if everybody is confused after listening to me, trust me, I'm more confused than you are as to what exactly is leading to this closeness between US and Pakistan.
Thank you, Sushanta. Lots of good ideas on the table. So, if I draw out two of the factors that our three speakers have brought about, I have pointed to, one is that the India turbulence and the Pakistan bonhomie may not be directly linked. There may be a tenuous linkage, but it's not something that we should necessarily link, very directly. The second point is that we shouldn't be looking at strategic drivers of the US-Pakistan relationship in what appears to be a very transactional summer deal. So, when we talk of China, is the White House thinking of prizing Pakistan away from China? Perhaps no. Was it looking at something to do with Iran at a time when they were about to bomb Iran? Perhaps. On the counterterrorism piece, let's not forget 2011 when Osama bin Laden was being fattened by Pakistan to be sold to the American at some price, but the Americans preempted that. So, and in any case, if the cooperation was being driven by counterterrorism cooperation, there should have been a lunch with the CENTCOM chief, not the commander-in-chief. So what drives it brings us down to perhaps crypto, perhaps the critical minerals deal. So, this will all be a subject to speculation, but the fact is that it peeves India to see this kind of relationship. I would have normally pushed our panelists a little more on some of these questions, but I see a very robust audience, and I want to leave space for questions. So please shoot your questions for any of the three panelists, identify them, and let's have quick, sharp questions so that we can take as many as possible in the next about 30 minutes. The floor is open.
My question to Mr. Foldy and the panel here is, amid the changing circumstances in international politics, especially with respect to US and Pakistan, how might the relationship between UN and Pakistan change the relationship of Quad countries? And if the relationship between the Quad countries deteriorate, or if I would say, if the relationship between the Quad countries becomes more relevant, how would it impact the relationship between the current relationship between India and China? Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, please, right here.
Thank you to all the panelists for a very insightful session. So my question is to both Sushant sir and Ambassador Ajay, since you were posted in Pakistan. So since you both brought in China, so I want to ask you, how has Pakistan managed to present itself as a Sino-American concubine, and that too in plain sight? Is it because of its geography, or is it because they are clever in their foreign policy, or is it just luck?
Okay. Yes, please, right behind you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. My name is Aditya Gulati. I am a student of MA International Relations at South Asian University, New Delhi. My question is to you, sir. We have a history with Moscow, and Washington has a history with Islamabad. And there is a visible discomfort in both the capitals about this relationship. Do you think that by viewing the relationship between India and the US by the Beijing lens or the Moscow lens or the Rawalpindi lens, we are deteriorating the capability and the potential of that relationship? Thank you.
Okay, so let's go with these three. Matthew, the first question was for you, and I'll take it to Shruti after that. That was about the Quad. How does the US-Pakistan relationship impact the Quad in your view?
Fantastic question. So I think, first off, from what I was saying earlier, this is not, I agree with personally about 80% of what I said. I'm just trying to give you guys my sense of what things are. There is a definite desire basically across America to forget the word Afghanistan exists. Of course, the Haqqani Network is a terrorist organization that is helping run Afghanistan right now. And for better or worse, I would say for worse, people in America are just tired of it. We think in 4-year increments. We've got elections every 4 years. A 20-year war is insanely long for America. It's especially for Europe. That's like a short war. They have 100 years wars, right? So all of that is to say, I agree. I think being president of the United States or prime minister of India is far cooler, better, more important, more impactful than winning the Nobel Peace Prize. I think the Nobel Peace Prize is not particularly, not even worth the paper that it's written on, given some of the people who've received it in the past. But these are just my senses for you guys to look at whether or not it's, our president getting the Nobel Peace Prize is a good or bad foreign policy pursuit. That is a big part of the American foreign policy pursuit. Again, I think that the prize itself is not that important. And when you think about America and Pakistan and the Quad, I think another thing to think about also is that Trump is a big fan, I think you guys know, with the trade discussion of William McKinley. Trump invokes McKinley and tariffs all the time, says that both of them think that tariffs are a beautiful word. Trump is also a fairly big fan of Richard Nixon. And I think that as you look at his foreign policy in your part of the world, and you guys were talking about, is America trying to pry Pakistan away from China? I don't think so, because I don't think that's a possible thing to do. But another prism that I think is helpful for you guys to look at, especially Trump's actions, are Nixon and China, and Nixon and the Soviet Union, and Nixon thawing our relations with China, that the whole world is dealing with the consequences of that right now. But especially at the time, you could argue that splitting up China and the Soviet Union was the way to win the Cold War. So I think that's, just a helpful, the more you guys know about Nixon, the more you'll understand Trump. and even to the point of, Trump believes that Nixon was unfairly kicked out of office because of Watergate, burglary. I mean, there's a lot of comparisons here: Nixon to China, Trump going to North Korea in his first term, et cetera, et cetera. So I think when you think about the Quad, it's also China, China, and China, and Taiwan is obviously not in it. But I was in Israel earlier this year when, totally coincidentally, I landed 4 hours before Israel bombed Iran. And then my whole trip was derailed. I was just sitting in a bomb shelter trying to get back to America. And I think whether it's with some of what we're talking about with India, but especially with what we saw with America do with Iran, when America ultimately came in and bombed Fordo, nuclear reactors there, looking at the Quad specifically with Japan, these are ways for us to further either isolate or combat, without weapons, China. And how does the U.S.-Pakistan relationship impact that? That's a great question that I probably need a little more caffeine to actually get to specifically. But I just think that when you look at our foreign policy, big picture, both parties, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, whoever's president next, will always talk about combating China. Some presidents, I think, have been better at doing it than others. And setting aside the more personal goals for Trump of getting the Nobel Peace Prize, his ultimate eye on the prize for American foreign policy is figuring out what the heck we do with China. China has a ton of leverage over America with TikTok. Again, you guys don't have that because you were very smart. And Trump sees how well he did on TikTok in the election. Of course, these numbers are all made up. So he'll keep extending TikTok. But I think that the White House just created a TikTok account, so it's probably not going anywhere. But the countries that are in the Quad, I think, from both an intelligence sharing standpoint, this is true with the Five Eyes as well, and the United States need to be fully cognizant that regardless of the day-to-day problems, and again, listen, if America and India are chilling their relationship a year from now, come to America and yell at me, because I just don't think that that's going to be the case. You've seen, even before Trump came into office the second time, he was saber rattling with Panama. What the hell? Why Panama? No one cares about Panama. Well, he wanted them to minimize the Chinese takeover of the Panama Canal, which we memorably sold back to Panama for like $1 when Jimmy Carter was president. So, I think the thawing relationship that you guys are talking about, looking at just India in particular, I think is much more of a tactical thing than a strategic shift of American foreign policy. When you guys had the horrific terrorist attack earlier this year, I messaged some of my friends who I met doing Ricina. I said, just kill all of them. Like, no one in America of serious foreign policy stature says, you know what, we're on Pakistan's side here. So I think with the Quad countries, the Five Eyes countries, and all of that, how does Pakistan fit in? Hopefully it doesn't join a lot of these, diplomatic alliances and groups and things like that. But I guess the final point I'll say on that is we are, and to your guys' frustration, going back somewhat into a world of binaries, like what George W. Bush said, you're with us, or you're with the terrorists after 9/11. And it's like, Trump is saying you are with us. He wants American energy to be exported. He wants European energy to be exported, et cetera, et cetera. Or you're with Russia. And we probably don't want you guys, again, I think it timed out, to be buying as much oil from Russia.
Would you agree, Shruti, to what he's saying is that China will always be a problem no matter who the president is? So where does Quad figure in this context?
Sure. Thanks, Ambassador Basaria. I think Matthew did touch upon the point that we've sort of been belaboring here, that we've seen the cycles of the burial, then rebirth, resurrection of the Quad over the last couple of years. And I think that's because that despite the sort of tactical alignments on all sides with China, or the sort of rapprochement in US-Pak relations, the fact that the Americans believe that China remains a pacing challenge is not going to go away. So like the Americans like to say that, we might not be same-minded, but we are like-minded on the China challenge remains. Having said that, there are two other things that happen. For partners within the Quad, I think there is a utility of India and their partners working together because, hey, look, a few months ago, USAID withdrew. You have regions which are leaning on this sort of capacity and capability building agenda of the Quad. You have just about managed to reassure ASEAN that Quad's remit is not threatening, and we are here to help on capacity and capability building. You have regions from Southeast Asia, Oceania, both important to Japan and Australia, which are now coming increasingly into the ambit of the Quad, where you are picking up pilot projects which you want to show as tangible deliverables. So I don't see that going. Third, remember the conversation when India joined, sort of mainstream the Quad in our Indo-Pacific strategy, was the fact that you won't give the Chinese a veto over your choices. So I think you need to see this as another example of where, whether it's the European Union or whether it's partners within the Quad, do decide to give that kind of veto, say, to the US relationship. So I don't think that it might wax and wane, but I think the Quad will endure.
Okay, the Quad will endure. On Sino-American camaraderie, Sushant will also come in. But, my feeling is that this whole romance between Pakistan and the US for this summer has the Chinese sanction. So when Asim Munir goes to Beijing, he says, hang on guys, we are with you, but we're going to play a game with the Americans. So it's not something which happens without US sanction, in my view. The second issue we are talking about, so Sushant will come in on this question as well. Okay, let's get the echo out. So the second question about US-Russia, India's relations this month with the US, with Russia, with China, have the power equation changed? I would make the argument, no, nothing has changed. The long-term position remains the same no matter what happens this August. This August seems like we have a terrible relationship with the US and we'll have great bonhomie with the Chinese and Russians. But the position will remain that the US and Russia are strong strategic partners for India, and China is a strong strategic rival. We may make tactical adjustments along the way, and we'll have a tactical battle with the Americans. But in the longer run, if you look at even the horizon till the end of the year, the position remains no different from what it was in July. Sushant, anything to add?
Look, on the Pakistanis making a play, this is one, I think it's very clear, this is not the 1960s when the Pakistanis could act as a bridge between the US and China, because it's a completely different world. The equations are not the same, the strategic chessboard is not the same, the rivalries are not the same. So I don't think Pakistan has that role to play. I think there is a kind of a tightrope walk which even the Pakistanis are doing. I am not as sanguine as Ambassador Bisaria. Incidentally, he is an eternal optimist on many things. I am, I think, an eternal pessimist. But my own sense is that there is a kind of tightrope walk that the Pakistanis are doing. I also think that there is, and don't go after what the Chinese say publicly. But I sense that there is a certain kind of disquiet even within China, because even the Chinese are not that stupid to not figure out that the Pakistanis have been treacherous with everybody. So if anybody thinks that the Pakistanis are not going to ditch the Chinese if the bread is buttered on the other side, I think they are going to be wary of that. Incidentally, as far as the China-Pakistan relationship is concerned, maybe the strategic element still stays in place. I think the economic element is more or less over. The Chinese have only lost money in Pakistan. They haven't really made any money, at least from the investments that they have made. So there is this delicate dance that the Pakistanis are trying to do between US and China, and they haven't been pushed till now to make a choice between the two. So it's all very well for them to act that we are very clever and our diplomats are the world's best, but that's because their diplomacy hasn't been challenged to a point where there are stark choices to be made. Let me just say a word on this whole Quad thing. Look, why this whole Nixon and China thing doesn't make sense anymore is because it doesn't make sense to me. Why would you alienate a country which, according to independent surveys, is one of the most pro-US countries in the world? That is India. Why would you want to alienate a country like that? Incidentally, India is even more pro-US than many of the European countries. And you want to alienate us to make, to push the Russians to become friends with you and end the war in Ukraine. I don't see how you add this all up. You are trying to punish the Russians and by punishing India, and then saying you are doing that because you want the Russians to come into the Western ambit and side with you against China. Second, you want to push India into a corner. Look, the trade sanctions are going to hurt a lot of people in India. The kind of tariffs that have been imposed on us will hurt a lot of us, a lot of people in India, especially in labor-intensive sectors. So you are going to alienate a large part of the Indian population, which will be made to suffer because you want to make the Russians back down and become amenable to a war. And then you expect that the Indians will be very well disposed towards the United States, and that political consensus that has existed in India for the last 30 odd years is also going to stay in place. I'm sorry, I don't see that happen. Third, you are saying that you want to punish India, and yet you are saying that India is going to be, or at least you are saying that the big challenge before you is how to contain China. And you are throwing us under the bus and then saying that you want to confront China. Good luck to you if you are going to be able to do it with all the other countries that you are tying up with. And as far as the Chinese are concerned, I think they would be smart enough to understand that for them, the principal contradiction right now is how their relationship with the United States is going to play out. And if that is the principal contradiction, then India is not their principal challenge, which gives us an opportunity and the Chinese an opportunity to probably settle some of our issues. I don't know if we can do it. I think there is an opportunity. I could be wrong out here. I am an optimist. You are probably a pessimist. But I think there is an opportunity. Whether we both sides grab it or not, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, so we have time for 3 more questions and 3 quick answers. Please. Okay, right here.
Thank you. Sushant, what you are saying is the US wagging the dog by the tail by imposing penalties on India to make Russia behave in a certain way or Putin behave in a certain way. Second thing is on your comment on the convergence and divergence on the East and the West. Do you think on the East things have changed further for us from that 95% you said, with things going down in Bangladesh and what is happening in Myanmar? And to you, Mr. Baldi, since you mentioned Afghanistan several times, besides Mr. Trump's statements, we've heard statements from the outgoing CENTCOM chief that Pakistan has been a phenomenal partner in countering terrorism. And there are recent statements saying that Taliban is also a moderate partner in countering terrorism. How would you react to that?
Okay, can we have one last question? Or 2 questions? Well, this lady here. Yeah, this lady here, and then one.
Can the US facilitate lasting peace between India and Pakistan because as Trump wants noble peace.
Okay, can US facilitate peace between India and Pakistan? Yes, first the yellow T-shirt and then the gentleman in the black T-shirt. The last two questions, yeah.
Hello everyone, I am first year student of Political Science Honors at Delhi University. My question is to Matthew that will political persecution of Imran Khan and its associates as well as the current state of democracy in Pakistan will impact US-Pakistan ties? Is there any communication related to this matter at the capital? Since President Trump has already expressed deep anguish at the persecution of leaders in France and Brazil.
Okay, Imran Khan. Yes, the last question for this gentleman.
I'm Dinesh Sharma. I'm a freelance journalist. We have been discussing a lot of vague issues, but I have a very concrete question to ask. 2 years from now onwards, maybe China will try to take over Taiwan. What will be India's response in that situation, given Mr. Trump's stance now about India?
Okay, China, Taiwan in the context of Trump. Sushant, quick answers, 2 minutes, and then we'll take it to Matthew for the last.
Look, on this whole wag the doll or wag the tail, your guess is as good as mine, but quite clearly they're trying to get at Russia through us. Even though the Europeans buy the oil and gas, it doesn't fuel the war. The Turks buy it, it doesn't fuel the war. Only the Indian money fuels the war in Ukraine, none other money. And the kind of excuses that are made to give them all a free pass, it's offensive to me as an Indian. If you have a good excuse, make it that, which can convince me. But this is worse than even double standard. It's worse than hypocrisy. It's pure chicanery. If that is what I can call it. Secondly, on the look east, or the convergence on the east, I think certainly the convergence on the east is far less today than what it was. That's my view, than what it was. And yes, Bangladesh is now almost a third front. You have unleashed Islamists out there in the name of democracy. And incidentally, somebody asked a question on Imran Khan. I don't think the Trump administration has any use for democracy, human rights, or all those nice things that the West used as a lever against other countries. I don't think they care about that anymore. It was an act even then, but it's now quite openly an act now. And I think some of the problems have also been on India's part, that at least insofar as places like Myanmar are concerned or Bangladesh is concerned, we've always tried to play by the book. I think we really need to alter how we handle some of the problems on our border regions. We need to have some kind of a frontier policy and not a foreign policy, which we have traditionally had. That's my view. I'm sure Ambassador Bisaria will disagree with me on that, but that's my view.
Yes, go ahead, Shruti. On China, China seizes Taiwan. What happens?
Ambassador, before that, I agree on Sushant's expertise on all fronts, except perhaps the only disagreement comes. According to me, the Chinese or Beijing has always been more manageable to India when the India-US relationship has actually been at the convergence peak. So we've had far more leverage with the Chinese when we've had a robust relationship with China, because they've always looked at us from a third-party lens. You might be right, perhaps new alignments create new opportunities. But if you see, I think the advantage really is with Beijing at the moment, because without really moving the needle on many things, they're reissuing the same language to us. And perhaps because we are at the midst of a geopolitical flux, we're trying to temper expectations. So that's one. Two, sir, on your question on China and Taiwan, I think if, God forbid, India's worst nightmare of a G2 situation arises, your question of 2 years from now, India won't need to manage the expectations with DC at all, because we'll be doing our job in the neighborhood. So any expectation of managing, DC's ask on what the Taiwan contingency should be won't be incumbent upon us then.
Okay, Matthew, you have 2 minutes for two questions. One was on Afghanistan and the second on Imran Khan. Will the US intervene in that case?
That's an interesting thing. I don't know how that's been breaking down. He's very corrupt, and a lot of Republicans have been recently just simply tweeting free Imran Khan. I don't know to what end. Some of the top Republicans in foreign policy in Congress have been pushing for that recently. What steps would be taken to that? I don't think anything meaningful at the moment is in play there. And on Afghanistan, going back to what we were saying earlier, August 31st is the 4-year anniversary of the outright takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban. And I'm sure you guys are aware that country in the past 4 years has been a breeding ground for basically every terrorist organization, whether or not you would think, whether it's Sunni or Shia conflict, it all dissipates in that country because America left such functional tools of ours, up to $80 billion of military technology in Afghanistan. So all of the bad guys of the world are able to use that as a breeding ground for nefariousness. And, again, for worse, we want to just move on from that. Trump, as you guys were saying, it seemed to be complimenting, and he was complimenting Pakistan with the Sharifullah extradition, perhaps at the setting aside of how the Haqqani network is literally in the government of Afghanistan. So I don't know what August 31st, 2025 is going to bring for this White House and Afghanistan. I myself have been kind of trying to figure that out with my coverage of, hey, what are we going to be doing to commemorate this? For those of you who weren't closely following the 2024 election, foreign policy to the extent that it mattered in the election, Afghanistan was central to that. And the Biden administration and Kamala Harris, when she replaced Biden, saying that she wouldn't have done that withdrawal any differently than Joe Biden, was an incredibly salient factor for people as they were thinking about their votes. And again, going back to kind of end where we started, first off, thanks for having me on. As definitely the least impressive of the people in this room, both in the panel and in the audience. I learned from both your guys' questions and from the remarks of my panelists, as I do at every ORF event. One of the lessons that I hope that we take from history, and in America we're very good at not learning from a lot of history, is that peace for the sake of peace is not necessarily a good thing. So what that means for peace with India and Pakistan, making sure that what comes next is better than what came before is important. Does that mean that that's what the peace deal that ultimately gets settled on leads to that? I have no idea. That's a thing for you guys in India to be reminding us in America, hey, we are more pro-Western than half of Western Europe at this point. And, the thing that I would leave you guys with from my end, I think I'm about 5,000 miles away from you, is that there, when you ask a average American whether they're on India's side or Pakistan's side, first off, they're going to say, wait, do they not like each other? I'm not aware that there's a conflict there. But at the end of the day, yeah, of course, I'm on India's side. So hopefully that got to those questions. But I'm very appreciative of you guys taking your afternoon and my morning to talk about something that is as consequential as the U.S. and Pakistan and U.S. and India relationship. We were talking about how U.S. and India is probably going to be the relationship of the 21st century, and we aren't there yet. All right, well, we got 75 more years to go, so give us a little bit of time.
Thank you, Matthew. The last remaining question on India-Pakistan, Matthew's already answered some of that. No, the U.S. will not be mediating anytime soon in India-Pakistan relations. And if Trump gets a Nobel Prize, it might be for all the other wars he's ended. Hopefully, he'll end both the Ukraine war and the West Asia war this year. But on that note, thank you very much. Thank you for all the panelists. Thank you especially to Matthew for getting up so early. And thank you for all of you who've joined us today. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.